Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Edit. Today I'm going to be processing this image of a red fox that I photographed in winter up in Yellowstone. Just a little backstory about this scene. We actually were able to watch this red fox hunt for about 2 hours in Lamar Valley. It was incredible. We were able to get those epic shots of the fox jumping vertical in the air, kind of doing the full arc, and then head down in the snow, tail out of the snow. This particular image though is right after he caught a vole and pulled it up out of the snow and kind of came right towards my camera. So it was an incredible sighting. So I've always been super excited about processing this image. So let's jump right in. Okay, so before I start processing any image, the first thing I always like to do is to check the sharpness of the image. I want to make sure there's enough information in this image specifically on the subject to be able to work with. So the first thing I always do is just zoom in and check it out. So if you come in here, we've got some great quality here. We've got great definition here in the eyes, back here on the fur. So this is a very nice sharp image. This is a good one to go ahead and process. So once I've determined that, the next thing I like to do is determine if there's any cropping that needs to be done. In this image, I do want to go ahead and do some cropping. I want to get rid of this horizon line up here. I feel like it does distract a little bit from the subject, which is the fox. So I am going to go ahead and probably do a somewhat of a tight crop here. Plus he's in the center of the frame here, and I want to make sure that he is actually just slightly off center, just to work with those rule of thirds a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here and do my crop. Make them a little tighter. This is probably something I would only be posting on web. Just due to how much I'm cropping, it's probably something that I would not be able to get a great print out of, but that's okay. This is probably just going to be used for social media and things like that. All right, that looks good. I'm happy with that crop. Maybe a little, he's a little to the side. Let's bring him in here a little bit more. Okay, now that I have a crop that I'm happy with, the next thing I'm going to address are the overall corrections to this image. So I do feel this image is a little blown out. I did overexpose it a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and make those corrections now. So I'm going to drop the exposure half a stop, and I'm going to go ahead and increase my contrast as well. And I'm going to decrease these highlights and increase the shadows. Next, I'm going to increase my whites, and I'm going to decrease the black. Okay. I am going to go ahead and increase the clarity overall as well. And let's go ahead and get some vibrance in here, as well as some saturation. So you can use the backslash key on your keyboard to see a quick before and after to kind of see the progress. So here's our before, and here's our after. So I'm very pleased with this. I'm starting to also regain some detail here in the snow, which I really like. And as you can see, we're already getting some more detail now in on the fox. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and start working on the fox himself. So I like to use the adjustment brush mask. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I always make sure I have this box down here selected as well, where it says show selected mask overlay. This basically is going to paint everything in red that I select, and it makes it a lot easier when you're going in and making these masks. So I'm going to zoom in. And what I typically do is I put on an auto mask first with a little bit more of a small brush, and I go around the edges of my subject, and then I take off the auto mask and I fill everything else in with a big brush. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Okay, now that I've got the outline selected, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this auto mask, and I'm going to increase my brush size and fill everything else in. Okay, now that the fox is completely selected, I'm going to turn off over here where it says Show Selected Mask Overlay. And for the fox, I'm definitely going to increase the sharpness on him. And I'm going to also bring up the saturation just a little bit. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and work on the fox's eyes. So again, working with this adjustment brush mask, I'm going to take a smaller size brush, zoom in here, make sure you have the Show Selected Mask Overlay on, and I'm going to go ahead and paint in his eyes. All right, so for the eyes, I'm going to bring up the exposure. I'm going to also increase the highlights and the whites. All right, and checking that before and after. Before and after. It's looking really good. And if you zoom out, you can see it's nice and natural. There's nothing crazy going on with the eyes, but it does draw a lot more focus in on the eyes. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the side of this fox's face. It kind of is falling off into the high key snow right here. So I'm going to do a mask right here to expose all of that back in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that box. And for this, I'm going to drop the highlights out. Okay, add a little bit of dehaze just to bring some detail back in. And I'm going to bump the saturation just to get a little bit of the color of his fur to expose as well. All right, so zooming out here. Doing a quick before and after, much better. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to address, I feel like these twigs here in the foreground are just a little distracting. I'd like a cleaner palette. So I am going to use a spot removal brush up here. I'm going to select these and get rid of those. So let's check the before and after on that. Much better. I just feel like it's a much cleaner palette down here. And then I did remove just these little bits up here because they almost looked like dust spots even though it was some sagebrush. All right, the last thing I'm going to address is the overall temperature of this image. I'm going to use a mask to do this though because I don't want to warm up the fox anymore. I like the coloring on the fox as it is, but if you look here, the snow does have a little bit of a blue tint to it. So to address this, the first thing I do is I actually take this adjustment brush mask and I take it and I make a giant brush. And I turn off the auto mask and I take the flow to 100. And I literally go in and I paint the entire image. Okay, and then I go over here and I select erase with the auto mask on, and I'm going to go ahead and deselect the fox out of this mask. Okay, now that I have the fox removed, I'm going to uncheck this box and I am going to increase the temperature of the overall image. Okay, so as you can see, that completely eliminated that blue hue. Let's do that before and after. All right, let's do a quick little check again on everything. Make sure I'm happy with everything before I export it out. This all looks great. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and export this out and show you all the final image.